This lesson is about adding and subtracting decimals. For most of you guys, this should be review, so we'll go through it a little bit quicker than normal. When you're adding and subtracting decimals, the most important part to remember is that your decimals must be lined up. So in this problem, I've lined the decimals up. Sometimes this means that we may have to add zeros. So here are a few examples of that. This is an incorrect example. The decimal would be behind the 2 in this case, so these would not be lined up. The correct way to do that would be to add the decimal and then put a 0 as a placeholder. So that means that 2.54 and 5.8, I need to put a 0 as a placeholder there. And then you just add down. So 4 plus 0 is 4. 5 and 8 is 13. Don't forget to carry your 1. Always draw your decimal spot in there. Make it a little extra big so everybody can see it. 1 and 2 is 3, plus the 5 is 8. Our next example is 11.05 plus 12. With 12, the decimal has to have 2 placeholders behind it. 5 and 0 is 5, 0 and 0 is 0, and then we've got 1 and 2, which is 3, and 1 and 1, which is 2. Remember that this also applies for subtracting decimals. I'm going to line them up. No placeholders needed this time. Now, you can't do 8 minus 9. We're not talking about integers here. So I've got to borrow. So this is going to be 18. I borrowed 10 from here, which means this is now going to become 7. So 18 minus 9 is 9. Drawing your decimal, 7 minus 4 is 3. So now I have a few word problems. Tom's scores in the diving competition were 7.2, 6.975, 8.0, and 6.96. What is his total score? So with our total score, we're adding all of these up. So I'm just going to do it all at once. 7.2, 6.975, which means I need 2 placeholders. 8.000 and 6.9696, which means I need an extra 0 there. Sometimes you might want to use graph paper for this type of thing because those little grids on there, the little boxes, can help you keep these numbers lined up real neat. So adding down this column, I have a 5. Adding down this column, I have a 6 and a 7, which is 13. So carry your 1. So 1, and I'm going to do a little grouping here because it makes it a little bit easier for me. 9 and 9 is 18 plus the 2 makes 20, and then my 1 is 21. However, you may have saw that differently. Just make sure that you get them all added up. Decimal real big. All right, so I'm going to do some grouping here too. I know that 2 and 8 are 10. This is 12, so that's going to make 22 total, and then that makes 29. Notice when I'm adding a lot of numbers, you see the little check marks or little dots that I put next to it. That's to help me make sure that I've done everything. So these were his points. So that's his total score. Sally scored 9.007 in gymnastics. Jack scored 8.949. How much higher was Sally's score than Jack's? So we need to subtract here, and we're always going to do big minus small unless our problem tells us to do otherwise. So I am going to have to borrow here. This becomes a 17, except this time I didn't have anything to borrow from. So I have to go all the way down here and make this an 8, which makes this a 10. But I'm going to have to borrow from that to make this a 10. But I'm going to have to borrow from that to make that the 17. So 17 minus 9 is 8. 9 minus 4 is 5. 9 minus 9 is 0. 8 minus 8 is 0. Please make sure you put the 0 in front of the decimal. It is a placeholder and it needs to be there. So this is how much higher it is. Please make sure you're also very, very careful with your borrowing because that is where I find that most students make the mistakes. Mrs. Jones purchased $30.46 in groceries, $30.46. If she gives the cashier $50, how much change will she receive? Will she get back? So in this case, we're also subtracting how much she spent from how much she gave. So again, big minus small until told to do otherwise. I need to make this a 10. So I have to go all the way down here to borrow. And when it does that, it makes this a 10. But I need to borrow from that to make this a 10. But I need to borrow from that to make my original one a 10. So 10 minus 6 is 4. 9 minus 4 is 5. 9 minus 0 is 9. And 4 minus 3 is 1. So remember your label. She is going to get $19.54 as her change. A 15-foot piece of rope has 0.56 feet cut from it. What is remaining? Well, because we're remaining, I'm going to take that 15 feet and I'm going to subtract that 0.56 from it. This needs to become a 10, so I've got to go to this 5 to borrow, which makes this a 10, except that I'm borrowing from it to make that 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. 9 minus 5 is 5. 4 minus 0 is 4, and 1 doesn't have anything under it, so that's just a 1. Oops, sorry, wrong label. There's my eraser, sorry. So I'm going to take that away, and then I'm going to label it correctly. Sorry, handwriting's a little bit bad there. That says feet. So that was all. Oops. Yep, just making sure that wasn't another problem snuck in there. That was all we had for today. Your homework should be in your Math ISN.